Hey everybody, it's your old buddy, Uncle Rich, live from Danbury, Connecticut. I get such a kick out of doing that. Because guys, when I'm dead, I'm not going to be able to do the show. It's that simple. So I'm giving you my legacy as I'm here. And today's date is October 7th. This is show 280. And the name of the show is going to be The Marty Party. And guys, I know everybody's probably thinking, oh, Rich, you're going to talk about impeachment, right? And guys, I tell you what, I'm letting Trump do all the talking. I'm not saying a word. And guys, now that a second whistleblower is providing firsthand information, I got one thing to say to people. Uncle Joey, pass the jelly. Guys, I've been saying Trump is toast to Uncle Joey for the longest time. And I tell you, what's happening now, it's like a snowball going down a hill. And it's just gaining momentum. And different Republicans are starting to join in, and the levee has broken. And when the levee breaks, mommy, you gotta move. It's that simple, and it looks like the Republican Party is finally starting to move against Trump. But guys, we're not gonna talk about that tonight, because we're gonna wait. Like my father used to say, aspetta. Uno momento. And whenever he said that, you knew, just shut up and don't ask anymore. But guys, it's all coming out in the wash, and I couldn't be any happier. But today's show is called The Marty Party. And why? Because Marty put up a video. He went to Ecuador and he filmed a volcano. And he put the volcano on his show. So guys, I love watching Marty's show. He's on Thursday night on Comcast Channel 23 at 9 o'clock. I try not to miss him so I can call in and give him the business. But guys, we're going to start with clip number 1, and you're going to see what got me going and what set off my alerts. So Kurt, number 1, please.
You talk about a carbon footprint. One of these bad boys gives off more carbon than the entire Western world over a 25-year period or something like that.
So they give off more carbon than all of the Western world in the last 25 years. And guys, right away, when I heard that, I started with clip 1A. Kurt? Guys, that set off my alarm. As soon as I heard that, I said, Marty, I'm not going to let you get away with this. And we're going to add to the fun because it's October and it's time for Halloween. Here's some people that had inventive costumes. So, Kurt, number 1B now. Isn't that cute? I bet you that guy works for the company and the company's named Graham. You think? Hey, I tell you. But guys, that clip, and we're going to play it again so that you get another taste for it. This is what set off my alarm bells. So Kurt, 1C, please.
3,500 Yeah, you talk about a carbon footprint. One of these bad boys gives off more carbon than the entire Western world over a 25-year period or something.
The entire Western world. See, Marty got it wrong. And guys, you know what? I don't know if Marty's confused, if he's ignorant, or if he's lying. But I don't think he's lying. Because Marty has the love of Jesus in his eyes. But the problem is, he's got the Republican Party in his head. And that's why he's confused. And guys, the next clip, we're going to show you how some people can get dazed and confused. So Kurt, let's have number 2, please.
So if anybody tells you that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is coming from volcanoes, they're either confused, ignorant, or lying.
All right, guys. Kurt, can you play that again? That was kind of short. Just play the clip.
So if anybody tells you that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is coming from volcanoes, they're either confused, ignorant, or lying.
Confused, ignorant, or lying. Now, Marty, everybody makes mistakes. The Republican Party and the fossil fuel industry spends a lot of money to. And Marty, I'm not going to bash you. I'm not going to give you the business. I'm going to say, let's make this a learning moment, so that this way we stop the nonsense. And by the time you're done with this show, if somebody says volcanoes put more carbon in the air than fossil fuels, you're going to go, no. Uncle Rich was nice enough to treat me like a gentleman and explain to me in a compassionate way so that I could understand and I wouldn't make a fool out of myself anymore. So anyway, now listen, guys, when I called up, it was spur of the moment, and calling Marty's show was always an event. But anyway, you'll hear my call in. So, Kurt, let's have number 3, please.
Well, first of all, let me comment on what you commented on about the volcano. You said that volcano will put more CO2 in the air than all of humanity. Marty, that only goes to show you how ignorant you are about the gases that come out of a volcano.
Did you hear Dave laugh? Everything's a joke to him when it comes to global warming and climate change. But guys, you know what? Being ignorant isn't so bad. You know, up until 100 years ago, we thought there was one galaxy and we were part of it. Now we understand that there are hundreds of billions of galaxies. And why? Because we're learning. And when we learn, we share. And that's what I want to do. So Marty, I'm going to give you the business, but I'm going to do it in a constructive way, in an educational way. And hopefully one day, the light will go on and you'll say, you know, Rich is just trying to be honest and trying to be helpful. But guys, you know what, the next 2 are stills. And I just want to read these to you, because the thing is that one of the most important things, nice job, Kurt, one of the most important things in science is things falsible. This means that if a claim is false, then that can be demonstrated by experiment and or observation. So in other words, if you can, you can tell me water freezes at 32 degrees. Uncle Joey would probably tell me it doesn't. But guys, you know what? We can get the temperature down to 32 and you'll have definite proof. So Kurt, can you go back to that one again before we go to number 5? Go back to there you go. Volcanoes do emit CO2, but it has a different isotopic signature than that of fossil fuels. And guys, depending on where you're from, you might say isotopic. So depending, you know, and if you're from Australia, you won't even know what you're talking about. Nice dissolve, Kurt. But guys, the one thing we always talk about is data. And when we show you the clips, we're going to show you how the carbon 13 has, carbon 12 is in, hey guys, you know what? So I don't screw it up when we play the clip, you'll be able to find which carbon 12 or 13 puts more. So guys, like I said, it's going to be a learning experience. And who better to help us learn than Neil deGrasse Tyson? So Kurt, number 6, please.
Volcanic CO2 has a distinct signature. It's slightly heavier than the kind produced by burning fossil fuels. We can tell the difference between the two when we examine them at the atomic level. It's clear that the increased CO2 in the air is not from volcanoes. What's more, the observed warming is as much as predicted from the measured increase in carbon dioxide. It's a pretty tight case. Our fingerprints are all over this one.
Human fingerprints are all over global warming. It's that simple. We'll explain it to you. But, he said the evidence is clear. And we'll also show you that. But, guys, there's always somebody that the fossil fuel industry will hire to try to confuse some of the people like Kenny Johnson. Kenny, you didn't think I was going to let you get off, did you, Kenny? Guys, hey, if you want to have some fun, go on Facebook. Kurt, can you put our Facebook thing up? And guys, hopefully, you'll meet Kenny Johnson. And I tell you, I don't know, I don't know how long the asylum lets him use his computer for, but hopefully you'll catch him on a good day. And anyway, the next clip we're going to show you. And this guy's probably one of Kenny's favorites. His name is Patrick Moore. And guys, he claimed that he used to be with Greenpeace. But we'll straighten everybody out about that like we did on an earlier show. So Kurt, number 7, please.
It turns out that carbon dioxide are not dirty words after all. We should celebrate CO2 as the giver of life that it is. I'm Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace for Prager University.
We should celebrate that the globe is warming at a pace that's never happened before. Wait, we're going to fix his butt, and I tell you, speaking of fixing his butt, he's the one that always seems to get everything ass backwards, and we're going to do from one of my favorite guys on the internet and the guy that really taught me how to be specific and cite your source. We're going to play some clips from Potholder, and, he loves to talk about sourcing. So, Kurt, number 8, please.
Human activity is maybe 3% contributing to the 3% of carbon dioxide that's in Earth's atmosphere. It's so negligible. It's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent.
Okay, not 4%, but 3%. Either way, when I did my video on Stephen Crowder last month, this is the claim I actually wanted to take apart. It's on his blog. Most of the rise in CO2 is coming from natural sources. But for some reason it didn't make it from Crowder's blog to his video. What's his source? It turns out there's only one, and of course it's a blog by someone called Ed Carroll.
All right, guys, we're going to have some fun with that. But in the meantime, we're going to show you Patrick Moore having an Erin Brockovich moment with clip number 9. Kurt, hit it.
A Canadian scientist has been caught in an Erin Brockovich-like moment when he's asked to defend that chemical against links to cancer rates in Argentina. Take a look.
Do not believe that glyphosate in Argentina is causing increases in cancer. You can drink a whole quart of it and it won't hurt you.
You want to drink some? We have some here.
I'd be happy to, actually.
If I'm proven wrong, I'll eat my hat. No, you'll drink the glyphosate. But guys, that organization, that news organization was nice to him. The Young Turks weren't very nice to Patrick Moore with the yellow rice idea. So Kurt, same guy, but with a little vengeance. Number 10, please.
about golden rice. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, then it's finished. Then the interview is finished.
That's a good way to solve things.
Yeah. You're a complete jerk.
That was awesome!
That was great.
That was fantastic. Congratulations to Canal Plus for a brilliant interview.
That was so good.
That was, I've never seen someone's bluff called better in maybe even in TV history, right?
Guys, that's what we call the old bada bing moment. And I tell you, we're going to have fun with that tonight because the thing is, we're going to show you a clip that he did with Prager University. So what we want to do is discredit Prager as much as we want to discredit Patrick Moore. And guys, you know, not that we want to discredit Marty, but we just want to say, Marty, wait a minute. We put the cards on the table. You had your opportunity to see them. Marty, if you go against science and Mother Nature, I don't know what else to say to you. Maybe you need medical attention. I don't know. But when you refuse to accept facts and data, you know, something ain't right. But anyway, guys, now we go to the longer clips. We gave you the little teasers, so now we show you the longer version. So if there was something of particular interest, you'll know kind of where in the show it'll come on. All right? So let's start the party with number 20.
Well, first of all, let me comment on what you commented on about the volcano. You said that volcano will put more CO2 in the air than all of humanity. Marty, that only goes to show you how ignorant you are about the gases that come out of a volcano.
So they don't have an effect on the environment?
There's no CO2 coming out of there.
Oh, it's going to have an effect on the environment.
It's like a whole lot of cow farts coming out of the top of a mountain all at once.
Kind of looks like the back end of a cow.
It does. I haven't really studied that. But
most of the gas that comes out of a volcano is a completely different CO2 than the gas that we create when we burn fossil fuels.
So CO2 is not CO2.
Good CO2.
Maybe CO2-4 or CO2-1.
Most of the gas that comes out of a volcano is sulfur orientated. It's not CO2. So before you say something on your show, Marty, do a little research and try to find out what you're talking about so that you don't embarrass yourself and your family. I mean, this is simple. And this is the type of education we want to give kids in school so that they don't walk around saying that a volcano is going to create more CO2 pollution than man is, because you're wrong. And Marty, you can look this stuff up. You don't have to be ignorant, and you don't have to coincide with Dave, who sits there and he puts up stuff that he can't source, and he embarrasses himself.
I think it's going back to that green point.
Why are these liberals so angry?
I don't know. They do seem upset.
They are.
You know what I think it is? I think it's like the childhood liberals, like we saw from that lady. Then they grow up to be this.
You know why I think they're so angry?
Why are they
Because they're
angry?
wrong all the time. They just never have the experience, the fulfillment of feeling right.
That's true.
It is. Yeah.
I think it's
So
frustrating.
let me just respond.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I was a Rich.
That was
always
good.
appreciate Rich's insight.
Yeah.
So he always likes to encourage us to take a scientific approach.
Right.
So what I did was this last week, I took a really scientific approach to this global warming thing.
Guys, if Dave did a scientific approach, he wouldn't be a denier. It's that simple. You know, I mean, I can understand being a skeptic. That's the idea. You want to be skeptical. But once the skepticism is removed and you don't agree with the facts, now you're just a denier. And, you know, they were talking about, they're saying liberals are trying to indoctrinate the children in our schools. They're trying to indoctrinate them into believing that global warming is going to ruin the planet. Yeah, that's what we want to, we don't want to indoctrinate. We want to teach them. We want them to learn for themselves. We want them to be able to read a thermometer. We want them to be able to understand what the experts are telling us, what the climate scientists are saying. So anyway, let's have some more fun with Spin and Marty. I mean, Dave and Marty. So Kurt, number 21, please.
I always appreciate Rich's insight. Yeah. So he always likes to encourage us to take a scientific approach.
Right. Please do.
So what I did was this last week, I took a really scientific approach to this global warming thing.
I don't know if he's trying to be funny here, guys.
And they never bias their search results, right? So I typed in there, I said, predictions that global alarmist lunatics got right. And I printed that, kept my eyes closed, and just sent it to the printer. And then I did the same thing on the other. I said, name the things that they got wrong, and just sent it to the printer. Mm-hmm. And this was a blind study. And I just pulled it off, and I noticed that eventually the ones where it said it got wrong, I ran out of paper. So I had to put another ream of paper in there, and I got tired of paying for paper, so I cut it off.
Okay.
But on the ones they got right, it was no paper. So the moral of the story is, I defy Rich to call in here and name one thing that the
Kurt,
global elitist, alarmist, liberal ones have gotten right in the last 100 years.
Okay, that I didn't know if that ended or not, but if you can just, you want science? Dave, you want science? We're going to show you some science. So Kurt, can you bring up 41? I'm sorry for taking this out of order for you, but I just want to give Dave a little bit of a stickler, and then after that we'll go back to number 22. There you go. So Dave, if that chart isn't as plain as the nose on my face, you need maybe better glasses. I think you are wearing. But look at that chart. Look how the very end of it is. We're going into the stratosphere. We've gone into places we've never gone before. But Dave, how did you not find this? All right, Kurt, you want to come back to me? So you did your research and you didn't find that chart? You didn't find that graph? Maybe you should go back to school and learn how to cite your sources. Maybe you missed a couple of years. Obviously, you missed something, or you want to miss something. I don't know what it is, but let's find out what you're missing with number 22, part 3.
Let's consider this question about the source of
Kurt,
carbon
I think
dioxide.
you want 22.
So we know
you went to 24. We're going to go back to Marty. Part 3, number 22. Okay. I don't know if that's it, but if that's it, hit it.
Marty, when Hurricane Sandy hit and the oceans rose, just as Outlook predicted, the site flooded. So, Dave, that goes to
But
show
Rich, I was just down there. I was down there 3 weeks ago. It's not flooded.
Okay. Were you wearing waders?
No, not at all. I was wearing shoes. I had socks on. My socks didn't get wet. It's not flooded. The Hudson River is still the Hudson River.
Marty, are you gonna claim that it didn't flood during Sandy? Are
No.
you gonna claim that when the oceans rose to the level that Gore said they would, that the site would flood, and it did?
Okay.
Rich.
The oceans rose because of waves. Because there was a hurricane.
You got it, Marty.
Okay, thanks for that. Appreciate your input on that. Okay. It was a hurricane.
Well, I appreciate the comic relief. I mean, can you name one place on planet Earth that's had a hurricane that the oceans didn't rise?
Yeah, there's like a storm surge, all hell breaks loose. And there haven't been as many hurricanes as they have, but they say they're growing in intensity because we're not voting for enough Democrats.
Hurricane Katrina.
So guys, you can see they conveniently missed the point. And the point was simple. If the oceans rose, I don't know, what was it, 6 feet? If the oceans rose 6 feet, which is going to happen, because as the ice melts, as the earth warms up, the water expands, eventually the oceans are going to rise. And when they do, the first part of New York to flood is going to be the World Trade Center. And they proved it. And guys, I'm sorry, I didn't put the clip up. I kind of forgot it. But don't worry, because I'm going to make up with it for the rest of the stuff that we do. So Kurt, was that 22 or 23? If we haven't done 23, we'll wrap it up with that. Okay, so that must be 24 then. Did we play 23? Okay, so let's go with 24. And
let's
guys,
consider this question about the source of carbon dioxide.
Let's have some fun.
So we know carbon dioxide levels are rising. Even the climate contrarians, skeptics, and deniers, everyone agrees with that. But you could argue, and indeed some of them do argue, that the carbon dioxide is not coming from burning fossil fuels and changes in land use, that carbon dioxide is coming from volcanoes. Is there something we can do to test that hypothesis that would tell us if that hypothesis were false? And the answer is yes. Volcanoes do emit carbon dioxide, but it has a different carbon isotope signature than carbon dioxide that you get when you burn fossil fuels. Organic life tends to prefer light carbon, carbon-12, so when organic molecules are forming, they preferentially absorb carbon-12 out of the atmosphere and tend to leave carbon-13 behind. So when you have biomass that becomes fossil fuels, those fossil fuels are depleted in carbon-13. So if you burn those fossil fuels, you should be returning carbon dioxide to the atmosphere that is low in carbon.
Okay, so guys, did you get that? Plants and material like that prefers to breathe in carbon-12, so that when they die and they go into the ground, the carbon-12 goes into the ground with them. And they don't like the carbon-13. All right, is that making sense? I hope so. All right, so Kurt, we're going to go with number 25 and explain it a little bit more. So hit it.
Organic life tends to prefer light carbon, carbon-12, so when organic molecules are forming, they preferentially absorb carbon-12 out of the atmosphere.
They absorb carbon-12 more readily than carbon-13.
So when you have biomass that becomes fossil fuels, those fossil fuels are depleted in carbon-13. So if you burn those fossil fuels, you should be returning carbon dioxide to the atmosphere that is low in carbon-13. So we have a test of the theory, a test that could enable us to falsify the volcanic theory.
You mean you're going to measure?
If carbon in the atmosphere was mostly coming from volcanoes, the ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12 in the atmosphere should not change. But if it were coming from fossil fuels, then the ratio should change, it should decline. So scientists have done that test. They have measured the carbon isotopic composition of the
look
CO2
at the chart on
in
the
the
right.
atmosphere,
Look at the carbon dioxide skyrocketing.
This is a really beautiful graph. This is one of my favorite graphs of all the things I ever talk about. So here's, on the right, there's carbon dioxide increasing since the Industrial Revolution, and here's the carbon isotopic signature. You can see that the carbon-13 value is falling, and it's practically a mirror image. So as the CO2 rises, the carbon-13 falls, and that tells us that the volcanic hypothesis is false. So if anybody tells you that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is coming from volcanoes, they're either confused, ignorant, or lying.
So that tells us it's false. See that, Marty? So don't say it again. Don't embarrass yourself anymore, because now you're not ignorant anymore. Now you know better. You've been shown. So Marty, there's no excuse. And I mean, you know, we're going to further go into detail with one of the most respected scientists around, Neil deGrasse Tyson. So Kurt, 26, please. Carl
In
Sagan.
1960, Carl Sagan's PhD thesis included the first calculation of the runaway greenhouse effect on Venus. This was part of a career-long interest in the atmospheres of the planets, including our own. In the original Cosmos series in 1980, Carl Sagan warned,
"We are releasing vast quantities of carbon dioxide, increasing the greenhouse effect. It may not take much to destabilize the Earth's climate, to
It
convert
looks sick,
this
doesn't it? Look
our
at
only
that
home in the
crap.
cosmos, into a kind of hell."
incoming light from the sun hits the surface. The Earth absorbs much of that energy, which heats the planet up and makes the surface glow in infrared light. But the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere absorbs most of that outgoing heat radiation, sending much of it right back to the surface. This makes the planet even warmer. That's all there is to the greenhouse effect. It's basic physics, just bookkeeping of the energy flow. There's nothing controversial about it. If we didn't have any carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, the Earth would just be a great big snowball, and we wouldn't be here. So a little greenhouse effect is a good thing, but a big one can destabilize the climate and wreck our way of life. All right, then where's the problem? Maybe the Earth itself is causing the rise in CO2. Maybe it has nothing to do with the coal and oil we burn. Maybe it's those damn volcanoes.
Maybe. No more maybes. No more maybes. Let's have some fun and let's learn. So, Kurt, number 27, please.
Maybe it's those damn volcanoes.
Maybe.
Every few years, Mount Etna in Sicily blows its stack. Each big eruption sends millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. Now, combine that with the output of all the other volcanic activity on the planet. Let's take the largest scientific estimate, about 500 million tons of volcanic CO2 entering the atmosphere every year. Sounds like a lot, right? But that's not even 2% of the 30 billion tons of CO2 that our civilization is cranking out every year. And funny thing, the measured increase in CO2 in the atmosphere tallies with the known amount we're dumping there by burning coal, oil, and gas. Volcanic CO2 has a distinct signature. It's slightly heavier than the kind produced by burning fossil fuels. We can tell the difference between the two when we examine them at the atomic level. It's clear that the increased CO2 in the air is not from volcanoes. What's more, the observed warming is as much as predicted from the measured increase in carbon dioxide. It's a pretty tight case. Our fingerprints are all over this one. How much is 30 billion tons of CO2 per year? If you compressed it into solid form, it would occupy about the same volume as the White Cliffs of Dover. And we're adding that much CO2 to the air every year, relentlessly, year after year. Unlucky for us, the main waste product of our civilization is not just any substance. It happens to be the chief climate regulating gas of our global thermostat, year in, year out. Too bad CO2 is an invisible gas. Maybe if we could see it. If our eyes were sensitive to CO2, and perhaps there are such beings in the cosmos,
this would solve the
if we
problem,
could see
wouldn't it,
all
guys?
that carbon dioxide, then we would overcome the denial and grasp the magnitude of our impact on the atmosphere.
If we could see it, you couldn't argue with it. But guys, the one thing you have to remember about CO2, right now we have about 400 and I think it's 10 parts per million in the atmosphere. 410 parts per million. That's a trace amount. It's a tiny amount, but it's enough to cause a catastrophe. But now we're going to play a clip from our friend Patrick Moore, And I tell you, this is where we're going to have some fun. We're going to let him shoot himself in the foot, and then we're going to carry on with some more fun. So, Kurt, let's see. I think we're on 29? Yeah, 29.
What are two of the dirtiest words in the English
Prager
language?
University.
Well, if you're concerned with global warming, as so many people are these days, the answer is obvious. The two words are carbon dioxide, or as it is known by its chemical symbol, CO2. One atom of carbon and two atoms of oxygen. If we pump much more of it into the atmosphere, the argument goes, we're going to alter the climate, catastrophically. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, CO2 emissions from fossil fuels, which constitute 85% of our energy use, must be reduced to zero by 2100. If we don't save ourselves from ourselves, we're toast. That's the claim.
We're toast.
Here's
Hear
what's
that,
strange,
Uncle
though.
Joey?
All life is carbon-based, and the carbon for all that life originates from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. All of the carbon in the fossil fuels we are burning for energy today was once in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide before it was consumed by plankton in the sea and plants on the land. Coal, oil, and natural gas are the remains of those plankton and plants that have been transformed by heat and pressure deep in the Earth's crust. In other words, fossil fuels are 100% organic and were produced with solar energy. Sounds positively green. If there were no carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, the Earth would be a dead planet, period. Talk about catastrophic climate change. Take away CO2 and you'd have it. And yet the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has deemed this essential ingredient for life a pollutant. But how can something that makes life possible be bad?
Guys, how can something that makes life possible be bad? And this is the doubt. This is what they want to try to do so that Kenny Johnson can sit there and go, how could something that gives us so much be so bad? Because, Kenny, when you see, as we go on, you're going to say, oh, wow, Rich, I never really realized. So anyway, Kurt, let's continue the fun with number 29. Got 29?
But how can something that makes life possible be bad? Before I deal with that question, let's get clear on our terms. It has become common to refer to the emissions from burning fossil fuels for energy as carbon emissions. That is entirely misleading. Carbon dioxide is not carbon. Carbon dioxide is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas, which is an indispensable food for all living things.
Indispensable food.
Can you have too much of it? In theory, yes.
Not in
That's
theory,
what climate
yes.
alarmists say is happening now. CO2 levels are getting too high. Are they right?
Any questions?
Well, if we look at the big picture, we find something surprising. For most of the history of life on Earth, carbon dioxide has been present in the atmosphere at much higher levels than it is today.
Yeah,
During the Cambrian explosion,
walking
when
around,
multicellular life first came on the scene, CO2 levels were as much as 10 times higher than they are today. From a big picture perspective, we're actually living in a low carbon dioxide era.
Oh, stop it.
The optimum level of CO2 for plant growth, for example, is 4 to 5 times what is currently found in our atmosphere. That's why greenhouse growers worldwide actually inject additional CO2 into their greenhouses. They want to promote plant growth. Likewise, higher CO2 levels in the global atmosphere will boost food and forest productivity. That will come in handy, since by mid-century we will have to feed 8 to 10 billion people. In fact, we're already seeing the positive effects of increased carbon dioxide now. Satellite measurements have noted the greening of the earth as crops and
The
forests
greening of the
grow
earth?
due to our higher levels of CO2.
What earth are you
It turns
looking
out
at?
that carbon dioxide are not dirty words after all. We should celebrate CO2 as the giver of life that it is. I'm Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace for Prager University.
He's Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace and a lying bullshit artist. And guys, this next clip is what Greenpeace had to say. So Kurt, hit it. Now guys, this is from Greenpeace USA replying to, what is it, Donald Trump? I can't read, it's a little small. On Fox and Friends. Okay, Patrick Moore was not a co-founder of Greenpeace. He does not represent Greenpeace. He is a paid lobbyist, not an independent source. His statements about AOC and the Green New Deal have nothing to do with our position. So Judy, guys, that was from the horse's mouth.
Then there was another flurry of activity.
All right,
6
so
years
anyway,
later.
now we're going to go. All right, slow it down there. Kurt's getting a little ahead of us here. So guys, you know, why Patrick Moore does this and why people like Marty, and well, Marty, I tell you, I got to say one thing. We did expose Patrick Moore on a previous show, and I got to be honest, Marty did shy away from him one day when Dave was trying to say something. So Marty is capable of learning. It's just a matter of, you just got to get him to look at it. And guys, let's be honest with each other. If somebody tells you 2 and 2 is 5, you're going to say, you know what? It ain't. And I'm sorry if you feel that way, because we can't do this anymore. And guys, the next clip we're going to play is from Potholder. And Potholder is the guy, when it comes to global warming, he's the guy that really helped me understand everything. And you're going to have the benefit of enjoying him as much as I do. So we got 4 parts here. So Kurt, let's start it off with number 31.
When bloggers and posters claim the anthropogenic component is 3.75%. New paper finds only about 3.75% of atmospheric CO2 is man-made from burning of fossil fuels. Only 3.75% of atmospheric CO2 comes from humans. New paper finds only about 3.75% of atmospheric CO2.
Guys,
EPA document supports
about
about 3% of atmospheric carbon dioxide. New paper finds only about
EPA
document supports only about 3.75% of atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. They claim their source is this paper published in the Journal of Atmospheric Chemistry and Physics. But as we'll see in a minute, the paper made no such conclusion. So how did so many people make exactly the same mistake? Was the paper ambiguous, badly worded? No, it turns out they didn't read the paper.
Didn't read the paper, right, Uncle Joey?
That told them that the paper made this claim, and they didn't bother to verify it. If you click on this link, for example, it doesn't take you to the paper being quoted. It takes you to a blog called The Hockey Stick,
How do
run
you
by
like
someone
that,
called
guys?
Tom Nelson.
A little
And whatever
deception,
route
huh?
you take, direct or indirect, all the claims lead back to Nelson's blog. He seems to be the only one to have read the paper, or at least a part of it, and he completely misunderstood what it was saying. The authors examine how radiation from nuclear power plants in Europe can affect the ratio of carbon isotopes in the atmosphere. Nelson read in the abstract that fossil fuel CO2 in the lower 1,200 meters of the atmosphere are close to 15 parts per million. And without bothering to read or understand the rest of the paper, he immediately worked out that 15 parts per million out of a total CO2 concentration of around 400 parts per million equals 3.75%. So that became his headline. Before I go on, here's a piece of advice, Tom. If nearly every scientific study concludes that about a third of CO2 in the atmosphere is anthropogenic, and a group of researchers discovers that the actual figure is 1/8 of that, they wouldn't mention it in passing in a paper titled Simulating the Integrated Summertime CO2 Signature from Anthropogenic Emissions over Western Europe. That's what's known in my business as burying the lead. They'd shout it out loud in a paper titled Anthropogenic CO2 comprises only 3.75% of atmospheric CO2 and hope for a Nobel Prize. So that should have been your first clue that perhaps the paper doesn't say what you think it says. So where did Nelson go wrong?
See? So they buried the lead, they didn't read the paper, and they expect a Nobel Prize. Guys, I heard today, and I mean I heard today, and I don't know how true it is, that Greta Van Thorn, we showed her on the last show, might be getting a Nobel Peace Prize. Guys, when I say I heard this, I mean I heard it, and I have no verification. But I was working on this show, listening to either Fox News, CNN, or MSNBC. Those are my three primary sources. And anyway, I heard it, and I'm not trying to give you the double reverse of the business, but we'll see. So anyway, now we're going to carry on with more fun from Potholder. And, you know, at least this one guy, to his credit, he admitted that he screwed up. But most of these guys, when they screw up, they'll never admit it. They just go on to the next thing. So anyway, Kurt, let's go with 32.
Anthropogenic CO2 comprises only 3.75% of atmospheric CO2 and hope for a Nobel Prize. So that should have been your first clue that perhaps the paper doesn't say what you think it says. So where did Nelson go wrong? Well, it's not hard to figure out. The 15 parts per million figure he seized on wasn't referring to accumulated CO2 content. Once again, it was referring to carbon dioxide flux, which I explained earlier. This concept seems so hard for bloggers to grasp that I'll try to explain it with an analogy. Think of the carbon cycle as water circulating in an open tank with a plate across the middle. The tank holds 1,000 litres, 500 in the top chamber and 500 in the bottom. And every day 100 litres of water is pumped into the upper chamber at one end, and at the same time 100 litres a day descends into the lower chamber through a valve. What happens to the level of water? Nothing. It stays pretty much the same. This is our carbon cycle. Now let's introduce some extra water into the upper chamber, which is our atmosphere, from a completely new source. Every day we'll add 2 litres of water, representing the 2% of anthropogenic carbon that isn't taken up by the carbon sink, and what happens? The level of the water goes up. The amount being added isn't much. It's only 2% of our total flux, after all, but it accumulates. And after 100 days, there's an extra 200 litres in the tank. That represents 2/5 of all the water in our upper tank, the atmosphere. So we now have two figures representing the water we've introduced. One figure is 2%, comparing our newly introduced water to the amount of water in circulation. The other is 40%, comparing the amount of this newly introduced water to the total amount of water in the upper tank. At the risk of labouring the point, our bloggers have confused these two figures. I hope the science is clear, but I'm sure a lot of people will still prefer to believe the hockey stick. So here's the twist. The authors of the ACP paper learned how their study was being misinterpreted around the internet, and they also traced the myth back to the hockey stick. They contacted Tom Nelson and told him he'd got it wrong. Researchers have occasionally done that in the past with little effect, but in this case, to his credit, Tom Nelson understood and issued a retraction.
So guys, you see how it's done? And you see how now that's researching stuff. And we're going to go right to the next clip so we can get everything done. So let's go to part 3 with clip 33, Kurt.
But in this case, to his credit, Tom Nelson understood and issued a retraction. Unfortunately, the bloggers who copied from the hockey stick were less forthcoming.
But these people
Jonathan DeHamel, who runs the Rye Heat blog, picked up on the hockey stick's retraction, but claimed Nelson had taken the site down because of pressure from the paper's authors. Even where he hints that this was in fact due to an error by Nelson, he blames the authors for not saying what they mean. And then Duhamel announces that Nelson didn't get it wrong after all. The contention made by Hockey Stick seems to be supported by old table from the Energy Information Administration, which shows the same thing. Only about 3% of atmospheric carbon dioxide is attributable to human sources. Look at the table and do the arithmetic. 23,100 divided by 793,100 equals 0.029. Well, the math is right, but once again in the caption it explains that this is carbon dioxide flux. This is exactly the same mistake that Nelson made earlier in the hockey stick and that Duhamel copied, mistaking CO2 flux for accumulated CO2. And blow me down, the lead author of the misquoted paper, Denica Boshinova, again had to intervene to explain the mistake. In reply, she was given a fact by Duhamel that only 3% of CO2 in the atmosphere is due to humans. This should be interesting. Boshinova tried to explain. Duhamel said, "I don't understand your comment. What else but gross fluxes is worth looking at?" There follows a long series of remedial lessons in basic climatology, which Duhamel finally begins to grasp. Then he suggests doing something he should have done on day one. "I would be interested in reading the whole paper." No kidding.
And guys, and Uncle Joe, he always gives me the business. Rich, did you read the paper? Joe, please. So we want to go to number 4. This will be the end of Potholer. So Kurt 34.
Then he suggests doing something he should have done on day one. "I would be interested in reading the whole paper." No kidding. Then this.
No kidding.
Many of us do not have access to the full paper, only the abstract. Studies funded by public money should be available to the interested public for free. A nice try, but in fact this paper is available for free. It's in an open access journal. Duhamel could have got his free copy as soon as he saw it being quoted by the hockey stick, just like I did. Then Duhamel complains that scientific papers are full of jargon that's hard to understand. Well, John, then perhaps you shouldn't be running a blog telling people the science is wrong, based on a paper you didn't read and which you thought is full of hard-to-understand jargon. Because the problem is, a lot of people assume that bloggers know what they're talking about and blindly copy and paste what you've written without bothering to check it.
There you go.
Case in point, what's up with that? And when it was all shown to be rubbish, Anthony Watts, who runs the blog, made the excuse that since the original author had worked for the Tucson Citizen, that's Jonathan Duhamel, I made the mistake of assuming it was properly vetted.
Oh,
well,
boy.
Of course, as we all know, bloggers who copy other bloggers are well known for having all their claims properly vetted. But let's face it, if the authors of the ACP paper hadn't contacted Tom Nelson, and if he hadn't issued a retraction, Watts would still be under the impression that the Rye Heat blog was properly vetted, and it would still be on the What's Up With That blog. Actually, it is. The only clue that the whole thing is bunkum is a small note here saying it has an error.
This post has an error.
And you have to scroll down to the update to find out that the error is the entire thing. Maybe, or maybe not. According to this letter from Duhamel, which is also printed in the update, it could be censorship, or duplicitous scientists going back on what they wrote in the paper, says the man who couldn't understand the paper. Anthony, why not do what Tom Nelson did and cross out the bits of Duhamel's story that were wrong, so that people can still see what was originally written, but they'll understand it was all nonsense.
Thank you.
They won't do what this guy did and copy your What's Up With That page a year later without any indication that the whole thing is baloney. I've been warning about the danger of relying on these bloggers for years, but thanks to the recent presidential election, this warning has finally gone mainstream. We've seen fake news stories about the two candidates and the phrase post-truth applied to the world of social media. But it's not just phony sites that are disseminating fake news. It's far more widespread than that. A blogger makes a mistake, whether intentionally or through sloppy research or just plain ignorance. His blog is copied by another blogger and copied by another blogger until millions of people believe it. This is fake news being passed around by people who can't be bothered to check it. So you can't trust the people who generate this fake news to get it right or to correct it. It's up to us to do that by checking where these stories come from when they land on Twitter or Facebook.
Where do these stories come from? And we got to check them. And that's why we do a show like Uncle Rich does, right? Kurt, how much time do we have left? Less than 2 minutes. All right, let's go to number 36 then, because I want to, the Young Turks had some fun with Patrick Moore. So we'll let them give him the bada bing. Hit it.
A man by the name of Dr. Patrick Moore appeared on a French interview. This was an interview for a documentary that a French station is doing about Monsanto. And he was supposed to talk specifically about something known as golden rice. Golden rice is something that is genetically modified and fortified with vitamin
and I'll
A.
say goodbye.
But during the interview, he brought up something really interesting. There are certain chemicals that are used in Roundup, of course the pesticide spray that's utilized on all these genetically modified crops.
Who hasn't used Roundup?
And while he was talking about this chemical, he made it seem as though it's absolutely okay to consume it as a human being. You won't suffer any health consequences as a result. Now, what the French interviewer did in this video was absolutely wonderful. So take a look.
I do not believe that glyphosate in Argentina is causing increases in cancer. You can drink a whole quart of it and it won't hurt you.
You want to drink some? We have some here.
I'd be happy to, actually, but not really.
I'd
but
be happy.
Not really?
I know it wouldn't hurt
I mean,
me.
if you say so, I have some glyphosate.
No, I'm not stupid.
Ah, okay, so you...
I'm not
No, but I know
so
that
it's dangerous,
I know,
right?
No,
I know
you're a
people try to
hustler.
commit suicide
You're a
and they
con
fail
man.
fairly regularly.
Tell the truth.
It's not dangerous to do.
You're a ploy for the
So you're
fossil
ready to
fuel
drink
industry
one
and
once?
anybody
No,
else
I'm
that
not an
will
idiot.
hire you.
Interview me about golden rice. That's what I'm talking about.
we did.
Okay, then it's finished. Then the interview is finished.
That's a good way to solve things.
Yeah.
The interview's finished.
That was awesome!
That was great.
That was fantastic. Congratulations to Canal Plus for a brilliant interview.
That was so good.
That was, I've never seen someone's bluff called better
Nice job,
maybe
Kurt.
even in TV history,
You
right?
can drink a quart
Guys, I
of
want
it
to
and
thank
it'll be
Kurt.
fine.
So you what? No. He's like, what do you think, I'm
Good
stupid?
man, came in early.
He said, what do you think, I'm an
We got
idiot?
all this together. Everything went
But
so
you just
smooth.
said it was perfectly safe.
And then
So he's like,
Dave
no,
and
you're
Candy
the
have been
idiot
really
that
helpful.
I'm trying to tell is perfectly safe to.
And
I'm
hopefully-
not an idiot. I'm not going to
hopefully
drink
Marty
it.
learned a
Of course
lesson
it's terrible
tonight.
for you.
He immediately
Hopefully we
he
showed
goes,
him
they go,
like
we have some
gentlemen.
news like this. He goes, I would
And you
actually.
can learn.
He said that.
And you don't have to be
He
a
literally goes, I would
ploy
actually
and a
not
pawn for the fossil fuel industry.
So you would actually not.
You can be a
actually.
man, stand
right?
up,
That actually, so the actually
and
was
get
a
the
not actually. That's what
Republican
he
Party
missed the
out of your
modifier
head. And Marty, when you go to church, tell the people, don't pray to stop global warming. Get out there and do something. It's really simple. So guys, once again, I want to thank everybody. Everything's been going pretty smooth, so I tell you, I couldn't be any happier.